Why is 9/11 so important to him?
Euromax. In 30 minutes on DW. Guardians of Truth. Exiled Turkish journalist Can Dündar.
I have paid almost every price of being a journalist in a country like Turkey.
And Mexican investigative journalist Anabel Hernandez.
People are dying every day. The government is involved.
She's been digging the country's soil to find out the truth.
They want to kill me, and they try many times.
Facing with a gun can change your life.
People need to know what is happening there.
Guardians of Truth starts May 3rd on DW.
This is DW News live from Berlin. The scale of Russian atrocities outside Kiev comes into focus. Ukrainian authorities say they've recovered 900 bodies following the withdrawal of occupying forces from near the capital city. Police report that most of them were civilians shot dead by Russian soldiers. Also coming up. As Russia threatens a further escalation of the war, at least 7 people are killed and dozens more injured in the latest shelling of a residential area in Ukraine's second-largest city, Kharkiv. I'm Amian Isif. Welcome to the show. A clearer view of the scale of atrocities is now emerging from the formerly Russian-occupied areas near Kiev. Ukrainian authorities say they've recovered the bodies of more than 900 civilians following the withdrawal of Russian troops. Police are reporting that most of them were shot dead by Russian soldiers and that more bodies are being found every day under the rubble and in mass graves.
These men should be preparing for the Jewish holiday of Passover. But instead of celebrating freedom from slavery, they're mourning one of their own. The rabbi overseeing this funeral on Friday said Russian forces gunned the man down in Bucha, a suburb of Ukraine's capital, Kyiv.
They killed him. They shot him. Not only him.
At least 900 civilian bodies have been recovered from the Kyiv region, according to police there. More than a third have been found in Bucha, the scene of some of the war's worst brutality. Investigators are looking into possible war crimes. Alexander Khemariv lost his entire family, along with much of his leg, when Russian troops in Bucha shelled the car they were driving. They fired at an ordinary car. They weren't interested in where we were going and why. The shelling just started. They didn't care. And God is their judge. He will punish them for this. Overnight, Russian forces killed at least 2 more civilians in attacks across the country, according to Ukrainian officials. That follows a strike on a factory near Kyiv, which may have produced the missiles that both Ukrainian and U.S. defense officials say were responsible for sinking Russia's Moskva warship on Thursday. Russia says it will keep up its attacks in the Kyiv area, as it warns against Western arms shipments. But fighting is mostly moving east. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said his troops were trying to break the siege of Mariupol, where thousands of civilians have likely died from weeks of Russian bombardment. More humanitarian corridors have been announced to try to get people out of Mariupol and other areas under heavy shelling. 52 days since Russia's invasion, Zelensky gave CNN Ukraine's casualty list. 3,000 soldiers killed, another 10,000 wounded. He put Russian troop fatalities at 20,000. The numbers are impossible to confirm, but scenes of death around Ukraine look only to multiply as this unpredictable conflict presses on.
Kiev's mayor says at least one person has died and several were wounded after a missile strike on the Ukrainian capital early on Saturday morning. The Russian Defense Ministry says the strike targeted an armored vehicle production plant. Moscow has threatened to renew missile attacks on the city in recent days, even as it appears to be bearing down on the eastern part of the country. Our correspondent Rebecca Ritters is in Kiev and gave us an update.
Well, hi, Amy. As you can see behind me, there are people starting to kind of come back out onto the streets. I'm standing on one of the main thoroughfares that cuts through the city, and we've seen a lot of pedestrians, some shops opening, and even some restaurants around town. So people trying to kind of get on with their lives as best that they can under the difficult circumstances. On the way up here, I came from Western Ukraine the other day, and I spoke to lots of people returning to the capital on the train. As you're reporting, Vitaly Klitschko advising against that, saying it's still not safe here. And Ukraine is preparing for more attacks on the capital from Russia, that Russia have threatened retaliation for other various attacks on them, including one on a warship in the Black Sea. And we've seen a couple of those attacks in the city in the last 36 hours. Yesterday, a munitions factory about 15 kilometres from where I'm standing was targeted, and in the early hours of this morning it was reported, as you also just said in that report, that another munitions factory on the west bank of the city was also attacked, and unfortunately one person was killed in that attack. So we're definitely starting to see some, Kiev becoming yet again a target.
Now, you also traveled to Bucha, and you're up to date. Next, DW meets a deaf woman who overcame discrimination to become a racing driver. That's in Sports Life after the break. You can always get the latest on our website. That's dw.com. I'm Amian Isif. Thanks for joining us.
We're all set to go beyond the obvious. We're all in as we take on the world.
8 hours. I dropped all the shares.
We're all about the stories that matter to you. Whatever it takes.
5 policemen following. I am being detained.
DW.
Where we are here is actually on fire.
Made for minds.
The passion and fascination for engines, racing, and competition is as old as the automobile itself. Lydia Sempere's dream was to become a racing driver, but she's had to overcome huge challenges along the way. This is how she hears the race action.
I wasn't racing in any championships. I had no sponsor, nothing. And now it's amazing just to be in Navarra and to be able to finish 3 races. That's already a big achievement, and it's the dream I wanted to fulfill.
The dream of being the first woman to win in her category at the Spanish Touring Car Championships in Navarra. Lydia does her race preparations in the hilly surroundings of Alicante, down in the southeast of the country. She is unable to rely on her hearing, whether during training or in everyday situations.
At night, I don't wear the hearing aids because they can only be used for a limited number of hours. Plus, it's the time when I can disconnect and rest. So in order to wake up on time, I need an alarm clock specially adapted to my needs. It has a part that vibrates under the pillow. I'm guided by physical sensations, which is why I need the vibration function to wake up every day.
Lydia also uses hearing aids in daily activities, such as listening to music via Bluetooth or watching TV with the help of subtitles. Sometimes she removes the devices and takes advantage of the silence in order to relax or concentrate. Lydia was born deaf and was given cochlear implants at the age of 2. Her father always supported her love for cars and speed.
It's all thanks to my dad, who was a motocross racer. And as I was his first daughter, he couldn't help but pass on that passion. He taught me to ride the motorbike, but there was a problem. I'd lose my balance because bikes aren't very stable. My dad's solution was to move on to karting, where you have 4 wheels and far greater stability. And that's how everything began, when I was 7 years old.
And she immediately started chalking up her first triumphs. Being the only girl, however, would prove to be another significant obstacle.
One day she said, "I don't want to be a girl anymore. They bully me at the races. I want you to cut my hair short like a boy." She had long hair and we cut it short, so that when she had a helmet on, no one could tell if she was a boy or a girl.
No father could bear his son losing to a girl. I asked my mother to cut my hair short to look like a boy, so that people couldn't tell, and to stop me suffering from that male chauvinist barrier. This is how I started karting, with short hair.
Today she can focus on her dream, with her partner always by her side.
Just drive, drive, drive. Feel the confidence and push. And don't worry, you have the entire day to practice. Whatever goes wrong today, it's just practice. We'll correct it and everything will be okay. When I started dating Lydia, I thought when she takes off her hearing aids and goes to the bathroom, what am I going to do if she can't hear me when I knock at the door? Then I had the idea of writing notes for her, like, "Open the door, I'm outside," or "I'm off shopping." You want to give me the hearing aid to dry it?
Lip reading is my primary support for understanding people. At night, I remove the aids, and I don't hear anything at all. When I'm lying next to my partner and she's talking to me, the light is too weak. So I place my hand on her throat, and that enables me to understand her.
She always wants more and never gives up. Her goal is formula racing. I know she's now racing with cars that will serve as training, but Lydia's future is to compete in the women's series.
But in motorsports, an individual's sense of hearing is of significant importance.
With the other drivers, you just tell them to change gear. But as Lydia can't hear at all, she needs us to tell her. In high gears, she hears a little bit, but in low gears, nothing at all. We have a screen that shows her the revs, and with LED lights in the top part, where she can see the right moment to shift.
The screen is here in front, on the wheel. As I approach a bend, the lights let me know that I have to shift down. And then I have to pay attention to see when I have to change gears again.
After each and every training session, Lydia and her team work on further optimizing the car.
It was more comfortable than the last time. when there was no way I wanted to drive the downhill section at full speed. I didn't go full throttle because I still want to get used to the car, but I felt way more comfortable.
More confident?
Yes, but I still want to improve.
Okay, now we can see what's happening. Lowering the gears, and the props is better, right? Over here you passed way faster. And braking was okay?
Yes.
The most crucial change in Lydia's career and life as a racing driver was a customized helmet. It meant no more racing in silence. And playing a pivotal role in that development was former Formula One driver Marc Guéné.
We got in touch with Marc Guéné, who turned out to be the only person who could help. And that's obviously something that I truly thank him for, because it changed my life completely.
In my family, my daughter, she does also use hearing aids. I think that made me also be more aware that there's a lot of kids that they may have some type of limitation. Helmets are modified for Formula One, but what they do is they do little modifications. But for Lydia, they had to do a big modification. I flew with Lydia to Belgium. I introduced them to the company owners, and I think they liked her attitude and how willing she was to be racing, and they did that helmet for her, which is something they've never done before.
This is the device I wear every day. This goes to my ear and this to my head, connected by a magnet. And this is the helmet Marc Guéné had made for me. I need these two gaps here for the magnets to fit inside the helmet properly. There are two because I have two cochlear implants that allow me to hear while I drive.
Siempre hay un camino en cada curva del destino. Nunca escucho el miedo pilotando en silencio.
Nothing is impossible. We set our own limits. I almost gave up because I wasn't enjoying it. But I kept going, and that's what I want people to see, that anything is possible.
The Navarra race circuit. Finally, she was about to take to the grid for her debut at the Spanish Touring Car Championship.
We're now in Navarra for the first race of the series. I'm worried because before I get into the car, I'm nervous. But once I'm at the wheel, I'm more relaxed.
It's our first race, so go one step at a time. Don't rush to be in front and win because you'll mess it up. Remember when you drove karts?
Yes.
You need maximum concentration. Forget everything, just focus and go for it. With this you fight, and with this you stay cool and think, and go for it.
And then they're off. She didn't take the checkered flag, but everyone is happy.
Muy bien, cariño. Dar un mal paso no es el final.
Her hearing may be inhibited, but her other senses are more developed. She needs to feel the vibration and behavior of the car. I invite anyone to put in some earplugs and hear nothing and then go and drive. Then you'll know what it's like for Lydia.
You have to go to the podium because you're the first woman in the set class.
What?
You have to go to the podium because you're the first woman in the set.
The next step in her racing career.
For me, the biggest thing about this race was learning and posting perfectly normal times. That's a solid start for achieving good results.
What's making the headlines and what's behind them?
DW News Africa.
The show that tackles the issues shaping the continent.
Life is slowly getting back to normal here.
We're on the streets to give you in-depth reports and insights.
Our correspondents on the ground reporting from across the continent.
All the trends that matter to you.
Next on DW.
Another edition of the 77%. Well, this week we want to have a conversation around teenage pregnancy and early marriage.
We hear stories of women or young girls who bleed themselves almost to death.
We've got a few emotionally tough topics to tackle in today's show, but we'll speak out against gender inequality.
The 77%. In 60 minutes on DW.
Sometimes books are more exciting than real life.
Raring to read.
But what if there's no escape?
The DW Literature List. 100 German must-reads.
This is DW News Africa. Coming up on the program, fleeing Ukraine for an uncertain future. What now? They stay and continue their studies.
What I've worked for, what I've gotten, and the stability I thought I had just went away in one day.
Are off country.
It's because of the strikes that make people go to places like Ukraine. They seek better education. They seek something just better than what we can afford, what Nigeria is giving us.
We find out why the Nigerian education system has become so unreliable, forcing many to study abroad. And the scramble to stabilize the Sahel. France and the European Union have suspended their missions in Mali. Germany wants to maintain a presence there with the UN force MINUSMA. So what does Berlin expect? And will Bamako accept that? Also in Mali, the ancient words ever true. We will hear how manuscripts written centuries ago are being preserved to live forever. And a sweet treat from Burkina Faso. The country's first chocolatier will tell us about the local twist to his pralines. Hello, I'm Christine Mundo. It's good to have your company. It has been 6 weeks since Russia invaded Ukraine and the war drags on. On this program, we have reported on the Africans who were in Ukraine when the bombing began and the difficulties they faced getting out of the country. Many of them are now back home in their countries in Africa, but others are still in Europe. Now, while European countries have made provisions for Ukrainian refugees, Africans who are considered third country nationals are not necessarily entitled to the same arrangements. Now, I will be talking to the former African Union's youth envoy, Aya Chebi, about what can be done and what should be done to help young Africans, especially those who are studying at universities in Ukraine. But first, here's the story of one man in the German city of Cologne who says the future he spent so long planning is now uncertain. Carolina Machaus sent us this report. And sitting at the table with me now is Aya Chebi. Aya is, or was, the first ever African youth envoy for the African Union. She has been in Berlin, where she's been meeting with Africans who fled the war in Ukraine. Welcome to DW News Africa, Aya. We've just seen a report there, one young man's account, but you have been meeting with others, Africans who fled Ukraine. Can you tell us a little bit about what they told you?
So I met with both students who are fleeing Ukraine and arrived to Berlin. We have, I think, about 300,000 who fled Ukraine and arrived currently in Berlin. We don't have the exact number of Africans in there, but I met also with networks, self-organized networks who are trying to help and who have been actually in the border trying to support people with humanitarian aid. And I think it's invisible, the African solidarity in Berlin and within Europe. Yeah. I think there is an amazing solidarity for Ukraine in general. But we know that people of color face first-hand discrimination in war, and especially women and children. And I think Bridges Over Borders, Kazakua, Tubman Network, and others, our African Diasporic Network, are doing amazing work in supporting, but they shouldn't be doing the job of the government as well. So I think that's where the difficulty is when you face the government.
And can you tell us about what the government should be doing? What kind of help should the governments in the European Union be offering specifically to Africans who are in the position that they're in?
I think European countries, and especially Germany, it's great that we're doing exceptional measures for refugees that have never happened before, right? But I think we should apply that to all refugees and all people who are fleeing conflict and war, and not only for Ukrainians, which the solidarity with Ukrainians is necessary. The government, actually Germany, have put in place Article 24 of the Residence Act to make exceptional measures to have people residency and be able to study or work, but that doesn't apply to non-Ukrainians at the moment. And a lot of Africans tells me that they turn down or turn back or deported back to their countries if they don't have the right information to what apply for what.
Okay. Can you just tell us a little bit the specifics about, for the Africans who fled Ukraine and find themselves in EU member states, EU countries, how long are they allowed to stay? What is their status?
Currently, in Germany specifically, it's until 23rd of May. And that's where the government says they will announce by then when they will take any further measures or extend their stay. And that, you know, keeps anyone in the unknown. Students who have done medical studies for 6 years in Ukraine and they're in the last semester, what kind of future they're waiting for them, and also what kind of psychological support they have currently to be able to apply, or what kind of legal support they have to go and register and go through the process of the application, which mostly also in German. So they face a lot of barriers and they need support just like any other refugee.
Understood. And you mentioned the students there, people who were in Ukraine studying. The idea was to get a qualification. Those studies have been interrupted. What can be done to assist people in this position?
I think, well, first of all, provide a legal framework, but also universities should open their doors. And I've been talking to universities that have programs only for Ukrainians. And I think if we can get 10%, 20% of those scholarships, or those, you know that an African student, to be able to apply for any university here, need to have 10K euro in their account. Who is a young person who can have that? Even a European young person. Yeah. So you cannot put all these barriers and expect people to find solutions.
So exceptions to be made for students like this, essentially.
Absolutely, yeah.
Aya, we also saw that African governments, and we have to be honest, were a bit slow to react in all of this. What are some of the lessons to be learned on that front?
I think more and more African solidarity, because if we act together as African, we've shown it in the pandemic, that we handle the pandemic better because we have a Pan-African solidarity. I think Africa's government maybe tried to do bilaterally and get their citizen back, but if we had a better coordination, we could have. Even though we did get a lot, we had 16,000 in Ukraine, we got over 10,000 out, and most of them returned to their countries. So the one really remaining here are the ones who really need to finish their studies, and if they go back, they have nothing to do there, and they cannot have equivalence to their studies.
Understandably. When I began the conversation, I was telling the audience about the fact that you were the first person to ever have the title of Africa Union's Youth Envoy. Your CV is remarkable in terms of the work that you've done to empower young people on the continent.